It's the most expensive brick on the block. When a Tesla can't charge in the cold weather, it is referred to by some owners as having become bricked, which is to say that it is as lifeless and useless as one. In Chicago, temperatures this week dropped as low as -9 degrees. Some owners were abandoning them at charging stations to be later towed away. This would seem to be a major impediment to the EV future imagined by President Biden, who says he wants 50% of all new vehicle sales to be electric by 2030. To help us understand whether this really is an existential problem for those goals, we're joined by Jenny Newman. She's editor-in-chief of Cars.com. So, why are the electrical vehicles having problems? Is it something having to do with the vehicles or the owners of the vehicles?
I think it could be a little bit of both. I think as an owner, if you're going to buy an EV, you need to realize, of course, that there's a bit of a learning curve with owning an EV. You need to be thinking about things like cold weather and its impact on your battery or your range. It's going to impact your range by as much as 40%. So that is significant, and you need to understand how to counteract that in the winter.
And is it that is it damaging the batteries, or is it just that they drain faster or don't? What's the key problem that people need to be knowing about?
Well, when it's cold out, of course, even with your cell phone, think about that. You're going to see some battery drain in that weather. And, if you have an EV with a range of 250 miles, you in the winter could probably expect to see about 150 miles. It's not damaging the battery per se, but this is a known issue. And, again, planning is a really important component of EV ownership. And I would also argue that charging at home is, I think, as this situation in Chicago has shown, really key to ownership.
What about regular cars? If it's that cold, well below zero, is everything going to go just fine with an old-fashioned gasoline car?
Well, you're not going to see the huge degradation in your range, but we do know that gas vehicles are about 5% less efficient in the cold weather. So there is a smaller issue there. And I think anyone who's experienced horrible winters in the Midwest or anywhere else across the country knows that you can be plagued by dead batteries in your gas-powered vehicle just as frequent, just as much as anyone else. So it definitely is an issue there.
And what about in Norway? Because in Norway, don't they own, it's cold and they have a lot of electric vehicles in Norway. So have they got it figured out, or do they do something special in Norway we should all be doing?
Well, I think Norway is maybe where we want to be in 10 years. So they've been working on this a lot longer. They have a lot more public charging. And I think they're an example that shows that you can have an EV and make it through the winter, without serious issue. I think that should be the gold star that we're all pointed toward as we think about moving toward more EVs across the country.
And is that what would mitigate this problem, which is that if there were a bunch more charging stations, you wouldn't have the long lines and cars running out of power or it taking so long, because you just take the time to charge, not take the time to wait in line to charge?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, right? It's kind of chicken and egg. So we definitely need more public charging. And as we see more and more EVs on the road, in fact, in 2023, EVs accounted for 8% of new car sales. So it's definitely increasing. You're seeing more people at public charging stations. The other side of it, of course, is that if you're charging at home, you don't need to rely on a public charging station. So that takes that out of the equation. Perhaps you only use public charging for road trips, for instance. One other thing to consider, of course, as an EV owner is really knowing your car. You're going to be able to charge much more efficiently if you do something that's called preconditioning your battery. So that is getting it up to the right temperature, or in extreme heat, cooling it down to the correct temperature for optimal charging at these DC fast charging stations. So that's a really important component. And I think for a lot of people, if they were already limping along on low battery reserves, they probably didn't have enough battery to support that preconditioning. So there's a lot that goes into it. Again, EV ownership, there's a little bit of a learning curve for shoppers to consider.
And many of them are moving along that curve as we speak. Jenny Newman, editor-in-chief of Cars.com. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.